I believe that First Lieutenant Commander Michael Turnage wanted the podium this morning. Could you come up here, please? I'll turn over the program to him at this time. First, I'd like to thank each and every one of you that showed up here today. I love and appreciate each and every one of you with all my heart. I wish we could have had a little bit larger crowd. Sometimes quality is better than quantity. I'd like to also personally thank Keith Howard, who's running for Sheriff Bulloch County in this next election. He's an old friend of mine from almost 40 years. We worked together back many, many years ago when we were just young children, pretty much, compared to what we are standing here today. And I'd like to thank Keith personally for coming out this morning. He's one of the few men I've ever invited to come to anything that actually showed up. And I do appreciate that. It says a lot for your character. Thank you, Keith. Mr. Carney?
Thank you. Let me see if I can set this up here. Good morning, everybody. It's nice to be here. It's my honor to be able to speak to y'all for a little bit about who we are and why we're here. This is a beautiful day that we've got here for our Confederate memorial dedication. We've got our reenactors here, which is always nice. I want to go over why we're here. What happened? What happened to make this division north and south? That division carries on today. Well, I want to talk about a little bit what was going on back in the 1850s. I want to go up until Abraham Lincoln got elected and talk about some of his misleadings, I guess I would say. How he brought on this war, because this war was brought on by him. But I'm going to go over background, what was going on in the 1850s. Talk a little better? All right, thanks. I don't want to hold it though. Is that better? I want to talk a little bit about in the 1850s, the impending crisis, I call it. Give a little bit of background. I want to talk about the election of 1860. Because that was an election year, and how that affected us, the South here. I want to go over to South Carolina. Of course, I'm from South Carolina. I'm proud to be from there. I want to talk about briefly what they did. There was so much going on. It's amazing, but I'm not going to talk too long, because I could talk all day about it. And I want to then expose some facts and some falsehoods. All right. Thanks. I want to talk about some facts that we may know and may not know, and a lot of falsehoods that we probably don't know about. Back in the 1850s, our country was young. It was growing. We had the Democrat Party, and we had the Whig Party, which had turned into a newly formed Republican Party, radical Republican. We had a lot of unrest and political disagreements in that area. The people were so opinionated. People were senators and congressmen. They were widely divided on how we should run this nation. States were being admitted. It got to where this, I guess I would say, obsession with slavery was in the air. And that was brought on by a group of people I'll talk about in a minute. But it got to where states were being put into the Union in pairs. One free state, one a slaveholder state. And that was, I guess, to keep the balance of power, keep it in balance, according to Washington. This formed a lot of waves of passion among our lawmakers and our Democrats and the Republican parties. Extremists come into play. Extremists in the North and the South created a bitterly divided nation. We had an honest president at that time. In the late 1850s, President Buchanan was there. He was a law-abiding man, as you may expect, and he worked with everyone. I'll get to touch on him in a minute. We had a group of people come up to show their heads. They, for some reason, got a lot of attention, abolitionists, they fanned the flames of slavery. They would bring up that word slavery, which in my mind, I think it would have gone away on its own. But they agitated northern and southern slaveholders. It turns out that the Republicans used them for votes because they were hungry for attention. They wanted to win at whatever cost. So the abolitionists worked with the radical Republicans and helped them get some attention, I would say. Slowly, the northern population outgrew the South. They became more, they had more influence up north than down in the South. There was a lot of unrest, and because of that, the word secession came around. States were talking about, we're not happy, we want to run our own government. Much talk about secession came, and much talk came around about the right for a state to secede. And this is to be understood because in 1848, a man named Abraham Lincoln said to the Congress, any people anywhere being inclined and having the power have the right to rise up and shake off the existing government and to form one that suits them better. We're going to learn that we can't believe what Mr. Lincoln says, but at that time we must have believed what he said because states believed in secession, especially the southern states. Northern states did too, but that's a different story. 1860, election year, the radical Republican Party nominates Abraham Lincoln. He'll run. Lincoln goes through the South, well, mostly in the North, and his campaign speeches are against the South. He pledges to free the slaves. Well, that's kind of a vogue term back then because it pleased the abolitionists and these other groups that were so pro-abolitionists at the time. Later on, Mr. Lincoln said he would not compromise with the South. Secretary of State Seward, a good friend of Lincoln, he's about as deceptive as Mr. Lincoln was. He said the Republican Party is no more inclined to yield than the word secessionists of South Carolina. Lincoln stands like a rock against compromise, which means Lincoln's not going to compromise. So he brings on war instead. People in the South, our Southern men, realized this shift of power was detrimental to our well-being. And we started to see the development of a hostile North. South Carolina's people were the first to realize this. And since she saw secession as being legal, she was the first to secede. South Carolina leaves the Union on 20 December 1860. Lincoln's elected now in November, but he doesn't take office until March 4th. Governor Pickens of South Carolina is busy at work. He's got to form his own government. He sends peace commissioners to Washington to negotiate. That later failed because on the part of the Federals. Buchanan, however, worked with them in a fine way, as best as he could. He was in an awkward situation.